My name is Justin Duerr. I'm an artist, musician, author, poet, writer, house painter. Let's think, what else do I do? I'm a reader, I'm a walker, I'm a shit talker, a coffee drinker. Yeah, we could go on. I think that's enough, you know?
Okay, so we're at the 2025 Outsider Art Fair in New York at the Metropolitan Pavilion, where I have 18 pieces of art in Vanderplas Gallery, booth C1, and I have one piece of art, but it's a pretty good one, at Henry Boxer Gallery. It's an incredible experience. I don't know how many pieces of art there are here, and there's thousands and thousands, and so many artists, and this is my first year having my work at the Outsider Art Fair in person.
I use a lot of text in my work, which I have a fondness for saying I tend to write what I can't draw and I draw what I can't write. So as I'm drawing something, maybe some words will spontaneously occur to me, but it'll be something I could never draw because it might be an abstraction. Like in this new piece I just finished, I write something about that idea that all beauty is derivative. There's no original beauty, because I'm writing about these characters in the Fairy Queen, and I really like that idea. But I can't really convey that idea in pictures. I could try, but nobody would know that's what I was trying to convey. So I wrote it.
I'm an art historian, former museum curator, so I love looking. So when I saw Justin's work, I was knocked over, metaphorically. The work is exceptional. Plus, he had just written a book, which was amazing. I mean, he's an incredible artist, very interesting person. He likes pets, and I bought some of his work, and I even convinced him, against his better wishes, to participate in an outdoor art show I was doing. So he went in the category of drawing, and he won the prize for best drawing, best works on paper in the show, even though he was reluctant and the weather was threatening. And at least one, if not two, curators and gallerists came up to him wanting to work with him. So I said, you see, you know, I forced you to do this, but it turned out to be pretty good in the end.
It does help in this way.
I got one the other day, and it's kind of when you were giving me that plug, but I just thought it was normal because I was getting off. I woke up and I started my entire back was
These I've been telling people are kind of different than some of the other ones because they have these Penrose tile patterns, which are a unique special sort of pattern that are not like these ones and these ones. They're not freehand. These five-sided aperiodic tiling patterns are unusual and special, and if you squint your eyes you can see they don't ever repeat. So if you extrapolate the pattern out to infinity, it'll never do the same thing twice. And that's the pattern that they use on non-stick pans to baffle the molecules of butter fat and stuff so that it doesn't stick to the pan. That's a practical application of a Penrose tile pattern, but I'm just using them for art and beauty. He sold that piece, so I'm gonna go get it checked.
I worked in Alaska on fishing boats, on those fish. They have the TV shows about them now and stuff, Deadly Catch and all this stuff, you know. And I did that, so many crazy jobs in my life because of being a high school dropout with no prospects and coming from a poor background and being an artistic-minded person, which is already like you're almost a criminal in society, even if you come from money or something. So I had gotten hit with things from a lot of angles, but I had all these horrible, crazy jobs, and one of them was working in Alaska on those boats, which I shouldn't say was totally horrible because I made a lot of money. That's the thing with that job. You can make money. So I made money, and that's great. But one of the things that happened to me working that job was it's because of the extreme sleep deprivation. You know, our work shifts were 16 and a half hours a day, every day, no days off. Except when you do offload, which then you got to do 32 hours awake. You know, so you go 32 hours awake, you know, offloading the stuff. You get back on the boat, you're on 16 and a half, 16 and a half, 16 and a half. You get a 10-minute break every 4 hours, you know, which is really a 5-minute break because by the time you take your gloves off, you can barely get your black coffee and then, you know what I mean? So, and it's that factory sort of work where it's real repetitive, and I'm in this repetitive sort of zone, and I had one of these experiences that it sounds so almost cliche, but I guess it's cliche for a reason because it's a thing that can happen to humans, I guess. But from behind me, I couldn't see it, but from behind me, I felt like this really physically like warm, like presence, kind of like mist or something. You know what I mean? Like all around me, pulling me up. Not out of my body per se, but just kind of lifting me up. And it was this, like, people talk about these religious experiences where like, I met Jesus or something. Maybe it's just the way my mind would conceive of such a thing. In my mind, this whole thing was this like goddess energy. Like I was like, oh, it's like the goddess who, this is the way I framed it. That, like, how would I say this? Because it's not intellectual. It's the way it felt. It was like a gut feeling. So the feeling was that I was like, oh, this is the goddess who exists outside of time. I told people about this afterwards and they were like, oh, well, you must just be going insane. Because people went insane on the regular in that job. I mean, I saw so many people go insane like it was commonplace. I don't know that this like goddess vision or whatever is there for everybody else. I don't know if that's what everybody sees when they die or something, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, but I can talk to it. Like I have a connection to it, and I did change because of that experience. Like I felt like I became a better person. You know what I mean? But I came home from that fishing boat season and I was like, I'm getting really serious about making art. Like, I'm gonna make my art, like, I don't care if I die. Like, I don't, because I got this, I guess that's the energy of it, is it gave me this energy, and I think a lot of people get this with religious stuff. The dark side of it is a lot of people, it enables them to do terrible things. I was actually reading the Upanishads and, what was the other one? The Bhagavad Gita recently, and I forgot some of that, the Bhagavad Gita stuff particularly. I forgot, Krishna is like a charioteer, like they're going into battle. This whole thing is about that you should be transcendent so that you can like execute people. You know what I mean? After working on the fishing boats and after having this profound weird experience with this like goddess essence or whatever, that I was like, I'm going to get really serious about making my art. And I came home and I tacked up this big old piece of paper to my wall, which I never really worked that big previously, but I decided I should go big. I was like, I'm going to go big at home. And I tacked this paper up on my wall and I started to draw on it, just freeform. I got a terrible cramp in my wrist, and my sweetheart at the time was like, she's from North Carolina, she got the accent. She's like, you dumbass, why don't you draw it on the floor? And I was like, oh yeah, I could draw it on the floor. So then I started doing them on the floor and they got way better and my wrist doesn't hurt as bad. The scroll drawings are usually 7-8 feet in height or width, because some of them are vertical and some are horizontal. The feeling of it was, I absolutely positively must do this. Yeah, I'm okay doing the pattern like this. If I was doing something else, I probably couldn't do it on the camera, you know, because I get too, not exactly self-conscious, but you know what I mean. When I'm really getting ideas and stuff, I'm like in some kind of zone, you know. It might take me a couple months to do one of these. I usually write down all the music I listen to keep track of how long it takes me. And then I think how many songs it took me. I'm like, oh, this one took 1,426 songs. You know? I was going to pull some scroll panels of history, some past ones, and just show them off, you know, as they are. I wish I could weight it down at the bottom, but that's okay. I can show off the top and then the bottom. So, you know, this is the top kind of section, you know.
That's one of your Penrose patterns?
That is, yeah, that's a Penrose. The Penrose patterns are complex. That stuff's no joke. Like, that'll give you a headache. That's a mathematical conundrum. These patterns are like, you know, deceptively complex. They look complex, but they're not really that complex. The Penrose patterns, good luck with that. That stuff's complex. You need a guide to do those. You need kite and dart guides. You can't really do them just freeform. But I was proud of this one. This was one of the early yellow paper ones. I found some yellow paper and I was like, oh, eureka, yellow paper. Where have you been all my life, you know? The scroll panels total about 42. This is the 42nd one I'm working on right now. And this is just a very small selection of them because some of them have been bought by people. Some of them, you know, my art dealer in England has some. Some of them are up in New York with Adrian. Yeah, here's a horizontal one, because some of them go horizontal. And get some purple pens. I got blue. I should get some blue. She wore blue velvet. Da, da, da. Oh, here's a purple one. Eureka. Look at that. If I couldn't sign my work, if I couldn't get money for it, I would do it just as dedicatedly. Got real serious about doing these things, and I'd do a couple of them a year because they're pretty large. And then around 2012, I had one laid out in this warehouse I was living in at the time. My friend had this, it was an old gas station, and he got it at this warehouse, and we'd have music shows there and stuff. And I had one of these big scroll panels laid out on the ground, and I was drawing it. And this person came over to visit, and she's looking at it, and she's like, wow, oh man, you know, there's so much detail in it and stuff. And I was feeling good about it because she was impressed by it, you know. And my roommate at the time, he goes, yeah, and the thing about them that's really cool is that they all connect to each other. So like if he lays them all down like in sequence, it's actually one big drawing. And she's like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. And it wasn't true. Like, he made that up. I don't know if he thought that or if he just made it up because he thought it would impress her and he could tell I wanted to impress her. Like, I have no idea. But I was so jazzed on how impressed she was. And I was like so grateful to my friend for like inventing this thing that I was like, I'm gonna actually do it. Like, I should actually do the thing that he's saying because that's really a great idea. Like, and then and so I went back and made scroll drawings to go in between each one that I had done previously. So the idea is to do this project of the scrolls for my entire life, make the thing, whatever it'll be, 1,000 feet long, and then I'll do a last final one that'll connect to the first one I did. And it's kind of deep. It has no beginning or end, because maybe that's what life is all about. That's how I feel, you know what I mean? That it really is just, you just pick a point and that's your spot that you're in it, but it's all based on your perspective. I was born in 1976. I actually was born not in Harrisburg proper, across the Susquehanna River. And when I was about 3 years old, my family moved to very, very rural Pennsylvania, in an incorporated township called Wanksville, which is not a town because I think the population is 10 or so, and there's 2 churches right up the road. So if that gives you a sense of the atmosphere of the town, there's like a church for every 5 people or something. When we moved into that property, of course, I was, 3 or 4 or whatever, so I don't have any memory of this per se, but the land that my parents got because it was cheap, they found this land out in the middle of nowhere, was the barn of where there was a house and a barn and stuff, but the barn was disused. It didn't have any utilities or anything, so we didn't have running water, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have indoor plumbing, any of this stuff. So I have a vague memory actually of kerosene like lamps on the walls that would throw the flickering like light and everything. But we lived in one room. We had one room in that house for a while. Like, we built it out. As I got older, it got more built out. But when I was much younger, it was one room with the wood stove, and we had blankets to keep the heat in there and stuff. And that was my brother and my parents lived in there. And then, as I got older, we added a bedroom, and then eventually my parents added a room up a ladder to their room. And so that's where I grew up. Rural, about as rural as you can possibly get. I don't even remember having a radio, let alone television and stuff. Both my parents worked, and they worked like crazy, and it was kind of, we were really poor, and it was some stress and stuff. And that way, I mean, they were really loving, parents and stuff. I mean, I never saw my parents fight in front of us kids. Like, they modeled great, relationship stuff and everything for us. So that's great. But we had problems with just like, we were super poor. We have to like eat food, and, it's hard, whatever. I have this memory of my mother, I guess, getting this in the mail. They had applied for some public assistance with food stamps or some kind of something, and I must have been so little when this happened, but I still remember it because of the jubilation, because I remember my mother getting this thing in the mail and like opening it and like throwing this thing up in the air, and it was like this big celebration, stuff like that. But we didn't really have, I didn't see a lot of art around except my mother's stuff, you know what I mean? And she had some paintings that she had done in her earlier part of life and stuff, and I saw those, but didn't really have a inkling of that stuff. I remember the first time I saw like art where it was in a formal setting, where it was just overwhelming beauty, was in a Catholic church, and we went to deliver some of these Easter flowers or whatever, and I was just absolutely bowled over by that there could even be something like that in the world. Because you got to remember, this is obviously before the internet, but also I think we had television by that time, but we had this like little black and white TV, so everything was black and white, and I lived in this kind of like, it was real rural, so there was the beauty of nature and stuff, but it was like this really black and white world, you know what I mean? It was like you got the radio maybe and the black and white TV, and just not that much like culture. Like, I didn't see colors that much really, except for like, there's like the green plants and everything like that. But going to this church and going in there, and they've got like the windows and the smells That's the other thing. It's like the scent stuff is so underrated as like a you know, perfumeries and all this stuff. Like just the idea that they've got this whole sensory experience and it's like sensual and lush and just like, I was just completely enamored of that. Anyways, I just got this sense of like that the Catholic Church and all this stuff, that was like, you know, sensual beauty and also more like, I guess, like, you know, open-mindedness or something. I associated all these things together in my mind. So I had this big like religious conversion, and I joined this Bible study group and stuff, and quickly butted heads with them. So I got the Bible, and by the way, at the same time, my mother, I think, had John Hersey's Hiroshima. He went to Hiroshima when the ashes were still like warm and was like doing first account reporting, and it's like brutal. Like you can imagine, it's like, you know, people with their skin sloughing off and all this stuff. You hear the shadow burn to the ground and all this horrible stuff, you know, and he's describing it in great detail. Those were the first books I read cover to cover, and I read them simultaneously. Like I'd read some of John Hersey's Hiroshima, and then I'd go back into the so-called Old Testament, the Torah or whatever. But I didn't understand that it was many scrolls that were coddled together and written in different times by different people. I'm like 12 years old. So I just read it like from the beginning to the end. And it made me crazy. Like it just, and combined with Hiroshima too, which is way shorter. So of course I plowed through Hiroshima like way before I got through this Bible thing. But by the time I got to the end of that Bible, I mean, I was like, I did read it in context. I didn't cherry pick anything, but you know, there's so much contradictory stuff in there. I already was a little bit like this, but it really put me into this mind frame of like an intimate personal relationship with like that text that was probably not good for me. Like, I mean, it was my own take on it, but it's got so much stuff in there about like guilt and, you know, doing penance and like all this stuff that's just like, and one of the one thing I remember that was eccentric, and I look back on it and think it makes like a certain kind of sense. I just kind of decided I associated the color red with the devil, and I decided that if I was looking at something and the color red was in my field of vision, and I blinked my eyes while I saw it, that the red would go into me, like through my eyes, and then be inside of me and be causing evil in the inside. So if I wanted to blink, I had to look at something that didn't have any red hue in it. And then I started to get to this like, and this is real Catholic, even though like I wasn't raised Catholic at all or anything, but it just seems like a Catholic thing with all their stuff about self-flagellation and asceticism, fasting and whatever. I decided that if I blinked while the color red was in my field of vision, then I had to like do harm to myself. You know what I mean? I had to like, you know, in order to make it like mean something. So I would scratch my skin open with my fingernails, you know, and then I had all these like wounds on my arm. And then one day at school, I always wore long sleeves. Even before this, I always was, I still am. I've always been a long sleeve button down shirt kind of person, even back then. And for whatever reason, I had like pulled up my shirt sleeve, and my teacher's like, "Oh, you're being abused," or so, you know, and it turned into this whole thing. Like, and I couldn't explain it to him because I knew it would land weird. Like I was like, if I tell them what's going on, they're gonna be like, "Oh, that's like totally weird, and your interpretation of the text is all wrong." And I didn't think it was wrong, so I had to play it cool. But then I had to kind of fess up what was going. I never told anybody at the time like what was really going on, but I had to like invent some kind of like narrative. Like I was like a kid, you know what I mean? 12 or something like that, yeah. And I don't know what really like changed with that. Like I think I just got into different stuff. You know, I would have weird things when I was a kid. Like I would see things that were, I don't know how to describe it. Like they seemed really real, but they couldn't have been real. And I don't think anybody else could have seen them, but I would see things, you know, or hear things too sometimes. I was playing guitar in my room. I must have been 15 or something at this point. I had an electric guitar with a little practice amp. And I left to go take a bath. And I've always been a night owl. That was one of my problems in school because I never could sleep at night, you know? So I was up at 3 a.m. or something, and I go take a bath. And as I leave my room, I could hear what I had just played on the guitar as if it was a recording, but like an exact recording. Like exactly what I had played, every nuance, every time I paused for a few seconds, a pick scrape, I turned the volume knob exactly as it had been, and I couldn't have remembered it that well. But some part of my brain was like playing it back like a recording, and when I would walk further away, it would get quieter. And I'd walk closer and it would get louder. And I started to get panicked because I was like, oh, I must be going nuts, like, or I must have some medical thing, like maybe I got some kind of like lead poisoning or like God knows what. It was freaking me out, you know, as it would. But then I thought, well, this is kind of interesting though, because this is a chance to experiment with like my mind. Like how real is this really? So I was like, you know, if I run towards it, does it get suddenly louder? And it did. But then the thing that really started to scare me was I was like, what if I see myself? Like, what if I open the door and I'm sitting there, and then what am I going to say to myself? And now I've gone into the realm of complete madness, because that's like when you look into the mirror and you try to not blink, and then your face just starts to become like wavy and distorted, or like scrying when you look into liquids. And you know, it's like, what is going to happen if I see myself? That's going to be too much for me to handle. I'm going to scream. But I didn't. It got louder and louder, and I went in there and I peeked around and I did not see myself, and then the sound just abruptly stopped. And I was like, okay, you know. I suspect there's some truth to that old notion that people have, that there's some correlation or interconnectedness between so-called mental illness and so-called artistic temperament, although that has a lot of baggage in a lot of ways. Number one being, if people are mentally quote unquote healthy, they're way better at making their art. Like this idea of the holy suffering, it's toxic nonsense, you know what I mean? Vincent van Gogh, if he had gotten good mental health treatment and lived another 30 years, he would have just made more art and it would have been fantastic. Yeah, there's all these little characters and stuff, and it's like kind of funny. It's kind of funny existing in this world of the artwork, and then I'll be in here working on this in this position for like 8 hours or something, and then Mandy will come in and be like, have you eaten any food? And I'll get up and fall over because my legs went numb. That's happened a couple of times. Like I go to stand up and I fall over. You know what I mean? If I'm in this same position for a long time. And it's like funny because it sounds like meditation or something, but I cannot meditate. Oh, I have an instant panic attack because I hate listening to my body. Like that idea of like, listen to your heartbeat. If I listen to my heartbeat, I'll hyperventilate. I can't stand, you know, like being with my body. You know, like people are like, just be in your body. You know, I'm like, no, do not want. But I like being with these characters and being in this world. I had some real hard luck. I mean, or like bad life decisions, I should say, but maybe both. Yeah, so I moved to Philly. My mother will never let me forget this. I moved to Philly on Mother's Day, 1994. I had spent a little bit of time in Philly prior to that because my brother had a friend who got a scholarship to go to Penn. And he dropped out of Penn after 2 years. But during his time at Penn, we would sometimes come down and stay in his dorm room, and then we would go to South Street. And we were musicians and into punk rock music and obscure bands and stuff, so we'd love to go to South Street and buy, you know, hard to find records and band t-shirts of bands you couldn't find t-shirts of elsewise, and, you know, stuff like that. This friend of my brother's at some point said, you know, there's a room coming up for sublet at this frat, Sigma Epsilon. And if you guys want, you can sublet this room for $100 a month. So for $300 for two of you, you can get a room for the summer. We were just completely like naive and sort of crazy and young And I had saved up money from my I think it was my third job as a cake decorator. My first job was thinning peaches. And then I had a job at a factory, not the same one my dad worked at, but a different one, you know, picking fruit off of a line of fruit that goes by you, and hated those jobs like grim death. And I come home and my dad's like, well, welcome to the working world. You want to drop out of high school? He signed a paper for me to drop out of high school. And he said, if I sign the paperwork, you got to get a job, which is good parenting. That was a good thing to do. But man, I was like, if this is life, I'm going to blow my brains out. Like, this is just brutal. You know what I mean? Because, oh my God, thinning peaches, my hands are bleeding. The guy who's like the foreman or whatever is like a child molester, and he's getting creepy towards me. And I'm like, man, you know, he's like, well, welcome to the working world, kid. I'm like, this is awful, you know? But I got this job as a cake decorator. I lied and said I had experience. Oh, I grew up decorating cakes with my mom, and I bought a kit and did a crash course, and I learned to make the little roses. So I saved up some money from that job. After that money ran out that summer, me and my friend had discovered, you know, we had started hanging out with other kids our age and stuff, and we had sort of discovered the reality of like punk rock squatters, like crusty punks or whatever, you know, and we're like, oh, we'll just become like that type of kid, you know. So, you know, these guys are living in abandoned buildings and stuff, and it was this big breakthrough, actually. Me and my brother, we ran out of money, and we didn't have any money to eat, and the frat, they had leftover cake mix in the basement, and so we ate nothing but cake mix mixed with water that we'd then microwave for like a month. We were like emaciated and run out of vitamins and stuff, you know. And then we met these like punk rock squatter kids that are like, why don't you just eat out of garbage cans? Like, there's always like half a pizza crust in a garbage can. And we were like, eureka! This is like a breakthrough. I told my brother it was a step up, and he said he thought it was a lateral move, you know. But we made the lateral move into that world, and then yeah, and then, you know, living that sort of reality, living in abandoned buildings and stuff was like dicey, and there's always that threat of extreme violence and craziness and hopping trains and all this madness, insanity, and there's no reason why you would put yourself through that hardship if you were in your right frame of mind. Like, because I mean, I saw people die like regularly. I mean, it was fucking harrowing. Like, I'm telling you, the stuff I saw, like, you know, I remember I lived in this abandoned health spa. You'd always hear the fire alarms chirping. We'd have to sneak in under the thing, and, you know, living with no utilities, body lice, like being infested with body lice is not fun. You can't sleep because you always have to itch them. I remember I had these people that lived at the health spa squat with me, Mike and Gwen, and Mike had this thing where he was like a Grateful Dead, like a Deadhead guy, but he'd always be like, man, I'm a good punk rocker because I get violent when I'm drunk, you know? And he really did get violent when he was drunk, and he would beat the living hell out of his girlfriend. Like, I think he killed her eventually, but when I lived with him, like, I'd wake up at night to the sound of him like cracking her head against the, you know, and it's like, what you gonna do? You know what I mean? Like, you're in that reality and you're sort of like, what are you gonna do about it? You know what I mean? Like, somebody gets stabbed, it's like, what you gonna do? Go to the cops? My friend Cabby, he's kind of an urban legend. He's like one of these urban legend people. He's real creative. I really loved him. He was like a really creative person. Had serious trauma, as you'd kind of have to be in that reality, but like, he was like really into like trying to transcend his physical form. So he got in, oh God, the saddest thing he ever told me, this is so sad, and this is like an insight into this world, right? He like cut his own ear off, and he burned all the skin off the bottom of his hands over a fire one time. There's a photo of him somewhere with his own ear in his mouth, like this, you know? Somebody thought it was funny. They're like, haha, the picture of Cabby with his ear in his mouth, you know? That's like how dark that reality was. But he was a really sweet kid, and I was kind of actually friends with him for real, and he was an artist. Some of his art is in my zine from that time period. He was saving up money to buy land in the Yukon, and then some bad influence friends of his went up there and got him back on PCP, and he was hopping a freight train and threw himself in between the train cars and got chopped up by the train. That was his end. But he was real into trying to transcend his physical form, and one time he was telling me about this, and I was like, you know, as he cut his ear off at that point, and he had burned the skin off the bottom of his hands, and I think he was talking about cutting his tongue out, you know, and I was like talking to him about this stuff, and he was like, you know, a big part of it is like, I love being in the hospital, because when you're in the hospital, people care about you. Like, they have to act like they care about you. You know, he's like, they're nice to you. they're like, how are you feeling today, James? You know, and he's like, I'm kind of addicted to that, you know? And I was like, whoa, that's like his only like way to get, like, you know what I mean? He's like, I'm gonna chop my ear off so that for 5 days I get treated like a human. You know? Being involved in all these different creative pursuits, music, artwork, nonfiction writing, and I write prose, poetry, and things like that too. They all kind of feed into each other. I always say, like, you know, I draw what I can't write, and I write what I can't draw. Of course, I get into nonfiction writing too, and that's just a different aspect of my personality. You know, I love to categorize things, and I love to figure out things that nobody else has been able to figure out, or find things that are interesting that nobody else thought was interesting and uncover them. I love that feeling. That's kind of a dopamine rush to me. In a given day, the way that I end up getting corralled into any one of the creative pursuits that I'm interested in is usually circumstance of what has a deadline, you know, what's looming, what's occupying my attention. So I do the decorative painting work on commission, which is a combination of my house painting day job stuff, working for a landlord doing odd jobs in house painting, which I've always done, you know, for decades to pay the bills and stuff. And I was reading William Morris's lectures and got into this notion that, you know, these ideas about labor theory married to art and everything. And I thought, oh, why don't I do kind of quasi house painting, but with decorative elements? I did my door first and got into that. So I'll get commissions periodically for somebody wanting me to paint a set of cabinets or a jewelry box or a guitar or whatever. And I'll usually, that takes priority because I think, oh, I should get that out of the way, you know, before this person is like, hey, I spent the money I was going to pay you. The nonfiction research usually goes in blasts, so I'll get really fixated and interested in some topic and just go down a rabbit hole that's like really deep, and I'll get really into it. And some of the stuff is almost self-destructive. Like during COVID quarantine, I wrote a 1,000-page book in PDF form. Yeah, it's about 1,000 pages. I think it's 898 pages, and it's volume 1, about the life and times of Mary Helena Bothwell Horgan Mowbray Clark. And she's a really interesting person. You know, she had a bookstore in New York that was open from 1916 to 1927, where all the hipsters came in and they distributed James Joyce's Ulysses, and she knew all these interesting artists, and she's the person that inspired Peggy Guggenheim to become an art collector. And you could kind of say that she was the person that got MoMA started, but she's kind of unknown, and what a fascinating character. But the book is almost 1,000 pages long, and it's only volume 1. And if you pitch it to somebody, they're like, well, you need to edit it to 300 pages, and I'm not going to do that, and you can't find anybody who can do that. And it's become kind of like a burden around, like I want to do something with it because I found all these historically important papers. I have them. I like found a lot of historically important papers in like an abandoned house and all this stuff, because if you actually get off the internet and put your nose to the grindstone, you can find all this stuff. Never have I seen such silverfish damage as these papers pulled out of this abandoned house, but very worth it. I mean, the context of this stuff, you know, this is Sunwise Turn Incorporated, February 9, 1922. That 1922 is the year Ulysses came out, and, you know, they're in the bookshop doing all this amazing stuff, and this person, these letters are regards to her desperately writing to somebody to try to keep the shop afloat, trying to borrow money, and I mean, it's just all over the place. I'm uncertain how to make it live a life. Like I put a little bit of it on Substack and 2 people read it, and I'm like, oh, this should really be like, this is like changes art history. This is huge stuff. And people are sort of like, yeah, but it's so long and who can read that, you know? But I was addicted to that. I still kind of am, but I mean, that was a lifestyle to me, writing that book. Researching that book was a lifestyle. I was on tour playing music, and my bandmate, Kevin, we were staying with our friend Whitney Waller, in Blacksburg, Virginia. She is a person in Blacksburg, Virginia, who would be the person who would set up a show for your band at the local vegan cafe or whatever. Super nice person, an artist, really interesting. And of course, as goes along with that, has this great book collection. So we stayed at her house after the show, and I woke up in the morning hearing my friend Kevin saying, Justin's going to find something in this book he's going to get totally obsessed with. And I was the skeptic in me was bristling at this. I was like, oh, he doesn't have me all figured out. He thinks he had me figured out just because we've been friends since we were like 14 or something, you know. And it turned out to be true, which was in this book by Dan Nadell called Art Out of Time, Unknown Comics Visionaries. And then I found this comic in there called The Wiggle Much that isn't really like a comic. Like it's just like almost like a paper doll, like toy theater pantomime. And it's like real mystical and just like so strange and like nothing I'd ever seen. No art, like it's some of my favorite art, just period, not comics art or anything. I just was like, this is so powerful. And I look in the back of the book and it says, there's nothing known about this artist at all. Birth date unknown, death date unknown. And I just thought, oh, challenge accepted. You know, this is like what I'm here for. You know what I mean? Yeah, I have a lot of characters that I use in my artwork, and it's mostly just hanging names on characters that like sort of stand for certain abstractions. They're almost like allegorical. That used to be a really popular form of art in the 1800s that kind of fell out of fashion, but maybe I'm bringing it back. You know, I don't know. It's not very like literally allegorical, like justice, Lady Justice, but it kinda is like that, you know, because I get into this goddess stuff. I'm talking about, you know, all this stuff like that, and I'm kind of thinking about personifications of abstractions, but then I think, well, they should have names, and they should have a little, like, coven, or, you know what I mean, whatever, that they are doing, how do they enact their powers in the world, and I come up with little scenarios in my mind. I have these utopian scenarios and stuff I play out in my mind, and then I think in real life, it would be a disaster. It would just be a cult and somebody'd get poisoned and, you know, it'd be a high drama in a bad way, but in my mind it can work. Yeah, Florina Phosphine 5 is my sort of like pen name. So I started doing Florina Phosphine 5 for these Fates of the Fairies books, which are sort of like super loose quasi-narrative. I think after I read James Joyce Ulysses and I read Finnegan's Wake, I was in the dentist office and this lady across from me goes, "What you reading?" And I held it up and she goes, "You must be a masochist." And I was laughing because I was like, well, I kind of enjoy dentistry, so I guess I am. Yeah, I wrote an article for the James Joyce Annual, which is an academic journal. I forget the university it's connected to, but it's an academic journal. And the James Joyce article that I wrote was about James Joyce's connection with the Sunwise Tern bookshop, and particularly how Ulysses, his illicit, infamous book, was distributed by Sunwise Tern and their experiences with it. You know what's I think I'm addicted to with that stuff, and this is a little bit like, I'm just being honest with myself here, like, there's a little bit of like negativity with it, or like chip on my shoulder, because I'm not a college educated person. I'm a GED case. I got my GED in 2012, I think, and I never even used it for anything. You know, I got my GED thinking, well, maybe I'll go to trade school or something, and I never went to welding school. So I literally never even used that, you know, and I just barely passed the math. I aced the other parts, but I'm terrible at math, so I was like squeaked by, but I did it, you know, and I'm proud of that. But when you start to get into this world of academia and you start to get into this world of like visiting the archives and stuff, a lot of them, depending on who you get, but usually get somebody like this, they're pretty cagey about people that aren't from their world. You know what I mean? It's a really insider game. And so it always feels like hugely vindicating and like a total coup to be like, I figured something out that you cannot deny that it's true. I couldn't do science because I'm terrible at math. Like I'd be terrible at physics or whatever, right? But like, I can do this kind of stuff, and there's this really addictive kind of like rush of being like, you know, it almost feels like, yeah, I don't know, like it feels almost criminal or something in a good way, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh yeah, I found this out, and I figured it out, and I wrote it. Like, I'm so happy that I'm that my Joyce article is going to be published in this really academic journal, even though I don't love the academic journal. I mean, it's not affordable for the average person and nobody's going to read it except other academics, but I love the acknowledgement that the thing I did was good enough to meet the peer review standard that Yale or whoever has, but I'm like a nobody that got my GED in 2012, you know what I mean? I just really love that, you know? Yeah, so I've been a musician for a very, very long time. I started playing the drums in the early 90s. And I like to write lyrics and poetry, so and I can sort of carry a tune, so I sing and things like that, and I've always had lots and lots of musical projects with many, many people. I currently have two, which is one with my intrepid life partner Mandy Katz called The Great Cackler, and we're an acoustic two-piece. And I have one called Northern Liberties, which is a band I've had since the year 2000. We played our first show in February 29, 2000, and that's my brother Mark plays the drums, and my friend Kevin, who I've played in bands with since 1992, plays distorted bass guitar. So yeah, this is a gatefold record cover for one of Northern Liberty's records called Parallel Hell. I forget what year this came out. There's so many of them, I can't keep track of them. This one was our most recent one, Self-Dissolving Abandoned Universe, which is an overly long title, but we made a mistake because I was asking my brother what the title should be, and I said, how about Abandoned Universe? And then Kevin said, well, I like Self-Dissolving Sutures or something, and then it got meshed together. But this also has one of the, oh, see, he always puts a lot of stickers and little things in them, because we're not such a popular band, so we want to make sure if somebody gets a record, they get a lot of extra stuff, so they might like it more, you know. But that's got the gatefold sort of, you know, it's from one of my scroll panels, and so is this one. So I think record collectors should clamor for these and be like, I need to get as many of them as I possibly can, because each one is significantly different. Wouldn't you like to have a whole collection of them, you know? There was 250 of these printed. And it's funny, I always say every one of our records is a million seller because we have a million in the cellar. So, you know, there's 250 of these made, and this was a number of years ago, and we probably have about 250 of them still. I mean, we'll play a show and we might sell 3 records or 4, or you know what I mean. But it's fun to do, and they don't go bad. So
having stacks of merch over the years is fine.
I live in this beautiful house with my beautiful wife Mandy, and she is also an artist and musician. At this point in my life, I almost feel guilty saying this. I feel so blessed, but it could change at any moment, and it's very insecure. Hopefully it changed for the better, but who knows with the economy and all the insanity of the world, what will happen. But I do 1 day a week working for doing, contracting stuff for this landlord guy that I've worked for 25 years now. So that's my day a week doing that. Then I work on my writing, I work on my artwork. Music is the least, for me, it's just the way my life has panned out. Music is the thing that other people care about the least. It's the least like materially rewarding creative thing that I do. It's super richly rewarding creatively and spiritually, but as far as like money or prestige or whatever, it's absolutely the thing that people are like, yeah, how about we not do the music thing? But I do it, I'm devoted to it. I have band practice once or twice a week, and then I do my artwork and my decorative painting commissions and nonfiction writing. And the nonfiction writing, I should say, I've made some money at because I did some books that were published and got some royalties from that and stuff, and so that's been pretty huge. So I get into these characters in the art. Like I have this pen name, Fluorinophosphine 5, and it's almost like a drag performer in art form. So I'm writing a whole piece of text, but the text is written from the point of view of this like kind of character that's kind of me, but kind of not, you know what I mean? And a lot of the performance stuff is similar to that, where it's, it's coming from me, but it's a little bit of that goddess energy thing like I'm talking about with the mystical stuff. Like it's drawing from a little bit of that otherworldly, and I think that the stage outfits and stuff kind of give it that. I was just reading about in the Fairy Queen about the May performances they used to do that were somewhat similar to Halloween, but it was considered expected and sort of normal for all the men to cross-dress because it was like the time when everything is topsy-turvy, And I like that energy, My experience with this goddess on the fishing boats and stuff happened at a time when I was experiencing a lot of fear of death. So like, if you watch those reality shows about that stuff, like a big old wave comes up and it might wash somebody out to sea or something, and there's all these like times where all the lights go out because the engine room got flooded or something, and you're like constantly sort of being like, oh, am I gonna die? Well, like one time we had the alarms go off, and sometimes it would happen by accident, and then somebody comes down, they're like, oh, it's not an accident, we really might have to like die. So they're telling us to go up, and what happened was that we had almost collided with a Russian boat because the Russian boats didn't often have the same level of like sonar, so they would try to sort of like cut off the boats that had the better sonar to try to find the fish, and they had done something like that, and it basically became everybody's cutting the wheel as hard as they can, and now it's just the cruel laws of physics, like will we collide or not? You know what I mean? We didn't collide, but we came within way too close for comfort, and so they were saying, hey, get up on deck, like, and I remember walking up those steps and thinking it was like the slow motion stuff people talk about, where you're like, everything's in slow motion, and I'm like reviewing my life and stuff, So I was thinking, and I was really underslept too, which is like, high propensity for psychotic breaks and stuff in that scenario. And I started thinking that maybe my experience with this goddess was that it was like reframing my fear of death, like taking like the fear that you might die and switching it into something that's like alluring and appealing, and in the same way as like a masochistic sort of thing, because the goddess, I've started thinking about this. I never really thought about it before, but the way that I think about it and feel about it, and the way that she kind of appears to me in my feelings and my emotions, because none of this stuff is like not a proselytizer, or like I don't have a religion that I'm trying to convert people to or something. It's just like a personal, like emotional thing, like bond with this deity or something. That's not even a deity. It's just a personal thing to me. Like I don't even know how to really describe it, but a lot of the imagery and stuff, she's like a vampire, or she's like a spider deity or something. And part of the appeal to me, or part of the thing that was like soothing to me at the time, that I kept with me, was that she was kind of like, oh, she's gonna drain you of your life essence and like put you in a web or something. But it's like because she loves you. You know what I mean? It's like this wonderful, soothing sort of feeling, but it's definitely death.
Now is the time we say goodnight. Good night. You're getting sued by the Beatles now. Good night, everyone. Fates of the Fairies Land. From your pals, Time Cube, Lutfi, Herbert Crowley, Mary Helena Bothwell, Horgan, Mowbray Clark, Floating Phosphine 5, and